Friends, we are live. Rusty back with you here. CFLW, the show for this Friday, June the 27th. June seems like it's flying by. Good to see you guys here. Hey, coming up, we'll be talking about some showers and a few rumbles of thunder along our East Coast already on this early Friday afternoon. Going to get into an active pattern for us here as we move through the rest of the weekend. A little bit to talk about in the tropics as well, that time of the year. As we get started, as always, CFLW, the show, sponsored by the Lean Law Firm of Central Florida. They're your hometown homeowners insurance attorneys. It is storm season, friends. Storm moves in your area. You get any kind of damage, wind damage, hail damage, anything caused by a hurricane. You have a burst pipe, even if it's been an auto accident. They can walk you through every step of the insurance claim process. They do offer free consultation and policy reviews. You want to support someone who supports the channel. It's real easy. Go to leanonmelaw.com. if you guys would like more information. Good to see you this afternoon. Hi, Chessie, how are you? Spring Hill in the house. Blue Goose also back at you as well with a 92-degree temperature currently in St. Augustine, 56% humidity. And we do have a couple of showers and storms beginning to work their way in. We'll start off our live stream here with what's going on right now. We have this broad mid-level circulation in the northern side of the Bahamas now eking up our east coast, okay? And this has promoted some really hefty thunderstorms in the Bahamas, especially the northwest Bahamas and portions of our east coast over the last couple of afternoons. Now, they've been much more organized off to our south, but at the hour, we're beginning to get some of these stronger storms working their way in. We do have special marine advisories in effect right now for portions of Volusia and Brevard counties. And when I put this into motion for you guys, you'll see that the actual movement of the storms is going to be moving offshore, which is why we actually have the marine warnings rather than getting special weather statements along the coast, because more than likely these storms will be pushing offshore as they do so. Now, again, if I show you this kind of in the broad perspective here, there's a very broad spin in the atmosphere right now, but it's kind of beginning to fall apart a bit. And now we're getting a little bit more linear action, meaning that the storms are moving, in one motion. There's still a little bit of a twist up here. You guys can see that if I go a little bit farther. We'll get the composite radar coming up, which will give a better perspective. But, the last couple of days, these storms have actually been spinning counterclockwise around this. And you can still see a little bit of that counterclockwise motion for us here. But at this point in time, these are going to pull the storms offshore. So I-95, US 1, A1A, Daytona Beach, Port Orange, Ponce Inlet, New Smyrna. Nice little storm developing over Edgewater. There's a little bit of lightning right now, so anyone who's at our area beaches from Daytona Beach south into Brevard County needs to stay weather aware. This storm is developing right now right over the Banana Indian Rivers, then moving off of the coastline again. So you have a special marine warning there for the inland rivers and then the inlet there and then off of the coastline of Brevard County off of the Cape. So again, Titusville, Indian River City, Port St. John areas, the waters there shouldn't be a strong storm, but we could have again. And look, the Weather Service is always cautious with boaters because you don't want to get caught in this. It's a much different story if you're outside gardening and a thunderstorm develops and you have to run back inside. It's a whole different story if you're 5 miles offshore and you see this coming your way. So they're extra cautious, issuing those special marine warnings, letting the boaters and the mariners know about that as well. Thunderstorms continue to develop on the southern side of Brevard County as well. We've got a couple here right over the Palm Bay, Malabar, Grant Valkyria area, Mico Barefoot Bay, coastal Indian River County is very wet right now as well. Sebastian, Wabasso on over towards Indian River shores. One lone cell developing on the far southwest side of Brevard County. Couple more scattered showers developing inland at the hour, but the best and impulse of energy is right along the immediate coast. And I'm talking about I-95 towards the coastline. A couple of scattered showers developing here in portions of Marion and northern Lake County, so towards the National Forest and the Astor Pearson area as well. That's what it looks like at the present time. Let me go over to the composite radar here. So I'm just going to turn off the Melbourne radar, go into the composite radar. And this, of course, will allow us to take a look at all of the radars as a composite over the last couple of hours. So when I expand this view out, you can still see the broad counterclockwise circulation with these storms. There's a cluster up here in the eastern panhandle. At this point in time, we've had a couple of special weather statements there. But again, these are kind of cooperating as far as not directly moving into our area. But it's still going to be a stormy forecast today. And it's still going to be a stormy forecast overall for the weekend, with this mid-level support. And we've talked about this in the live stream from time to time. Not only are you going to get your sea breeze interaction, but this mid-level support is going to allow, additional thunderstorms to develop in a fairly widespread fashion. The risk for today for severe weather is there. It's a marginal risk. We've actually been under a marginal risk basically every day this week. We've had a couple of clusters of strong storms develop, nothing severe organized. Still don't expect anything to be organized for today. It's almost all of our area. The far west coast is under the general thunderstorm risk. Again, it's a marginal risk. Our best time frame is going to be from the mid-afternoon hours until about 8 o'clock tonight, so about 3 to 8. Winds are going to be the primary threats, pushing the severe thunderstorm criteria up to 60 miles an hour. Most of the time, though, they're going to hold in that 40 to 55, and some smaller sized hail as well. A couple of, pea, dime, nickel sized hail probably at best. But there is a marginal risk for today. It's a 1 out of 5. But look, it's not atypical, and we've actually been under a marginal risk the last couple of days. And, the reason why is, again, we're getting more support from the mid-levels of the atmosphere with this broad rotation. I'm going to bring on the enhanced satellite imagery just to get you guys a couple of different ideas of this. This will be kind of moving up the Gulf Stream and fading a bit, but still enough in the area to provide support for more widespread storms of the weekend. It's a pretty stormy forecast. Look, it's June. We typically expect that, but that's going to enhance the sea breeze thunderstorms we get in the afternoon hours. This is what it looks like on the visible satellite imagery, all right? And with this visible satellite imagery, I'm going to bring on the winds, the profile field here at the surface, just so you guys can kind of get an idea, right? Kind of this broad twist here, but more than anything, you notice that the winds are just not unidirectional, right? They're just not unidirectional. We're trying to push some of the east winds back on shore, but they're also bumping into more kind of south winds. And at least in the short term, these have pushed the storms along the coast and back offshore. Now, ultimately, they will probably be able to march their way inland as the East Coast sea breeze begins to get back inland as well. It's going to be a fight today because the mid-level winds are more out of the southwest, but ultimately the surface winds kind of more out of the east, turning out of the east right now. They've been more out of the south or southwest than anything, but along the coast, they'll start to turn more out of the east. You can see these arrows beginning to turn in that direction at the 1 o'clock hour, should ultimately push more of these storms back inland. So, if you live in Volusia or Brevard counties, you could get hit by a couple of different waves because this first wave kind of coming offshore or hugging the coast, stopping, and then pushing back inland as we go through the remainder of the afternoon hours. So what it looks like temperature-wise for us right now, let's see here. Let's bring on the temperatures. Let me pause this real quick. So your temperatures right now, I tell you what, actually, let's do this. Temperatures of the visual satellite imagery. Hey, Kevin, good afternoon to you as well. Yeah, they're moving eastbound right now, Blue Goose, but ultimately I expect them to actually try and turn and come back a little bit westbound as well. It's a battleground along the East Coast with the southwest mid-level winds and the East Coast sea breeze trying to kick back on shore. Now, the extra cloud coverage has kept it a slightly cooler here. And again, if you've had some heavier rain like Titusville, you're in at just 77. But please note, these surface winds are out of the east. And that's what I'm trying to talk about here. Satellite Beach also has a surface wind out of the east. Orlando right now has a variable wind that'll begin to turn back out of the east eventually as well. Leesburg at the hour has a variable wind. If I go farther enough to the west towards Spring Hill, there's a north wind, all right? So we've got a southwest wind here in Lake County, all right? So again, generally speaking, your winds are kind of coming here. There's even a little bit of a north wind up here. Let's check Ocala's wind at the hour. Variable, Inverness area, south wind here. But again, along the coast, Daytona Beach has an east wind. St. Augustine has an east wind. Ultimately, the East Coast sea breeze should push inland and take these storms from east to west, but it's just beginning to develop at the hour. Wind gusts look like this. We've had some 20 to 25 mile an hour breezes out there. Nothing outrageous. I'll put this back into motion so you guys can see. And it's actually pretty clear to see as well. If you look at the visible satellite imagery, you'll see a little bit of that north component there. You'll see a little bit of the south to southwest component of the wind here. And then you'll ultimately start to see some of these showers and storms staying along the coast. And then we'll get the east coast sea breeze to kick in. So that's why it's going to be an active pattern, because ultimately these storms are going to develop along the coast and work their way back off towards the inland locations. What do you say we take a live look to our cameras? And I forgot to check all of these before we came on, so I'm hoping all of them are up. Live look outside to Conway, southern side, southeast side of the downtown Orlando area. You can see the building clouds, and again, we're looking off towards the east. So if you look down the horizon, you see some of those showers developing along the coastline, and a little bit of vertical development with some of the cloud coverage already. You know, the clouds have been relatively thick here in the Orlando area most of the late morning and into this early afternoon, mostly cloudy skies. Again, darker bases right now. It's just the first signs of there being a little bit more instability. Obviously, we're heating up the surface. We're beginning to get some of these cumulus clouds to get going, and you know, they'll get even a little bit stronger. Winter garden we go. Winter garden we go. Now we're looking back off towards the west, right? A little bit quieter conditions west at this point in time. You can clearly see when you look west, a little bit more fair weather detached clouds at this point in time. A little bit of lowering here. This is a gorgeous shot, by the way. Let me get my ugly, not fantastic looking face off of camera so you guys can get a much better shot at this. But again, love this high definition camera we have here at Winter Garden, and it really helps to tell the story. Now, if you look at some of these cloud structures, a little bit of vertical development beginning to start to get going right now. Again, we're heating up the low levels of the atmosphere. Things are beginning to kind of percolate up right now, and this will be an overall trend. But at this point in time, nothing is really connected, nice detached clouds than anything. You know, this isn't bad right now. Few lower cloud bases there, but ultimately, I'm not expecting anything to get going here, at least in the short term. Now, attractions area. I do ultimately wish that we had a little bit more sky in this camera, but you can clearly see that as we look back to the south, there's actually more mid-level clouds, right, which is kind of streaking through. So it looks a little bit cloudier here in the Lake Buena Vista area as we look off to the south because of that higher deck of clouds that's coming in, but ultimately still no threat for any rain, at least in the short term here in the attractions area. All right, back over to the weather computer, and as always, you guys have a specific question about the forecast, feel free to let me know in the comments section below. And by the way, we're gonna have a little something to talk about tropically as well. There is a very low risk for excessive rainfall for today, okay? This is what this product is, all right? It's a very low risk, and this is what I'm talking about. These storms are trying to push offshore right now, but they're gonna stay pinned along I-95 for a couple of hours. So from the southern sides of Flagler County, and I really expect it to be more of the coast than anything, but most of Volusia, some of Seminole, some of Orange, all of Brevard, most of Polk County, and all of Indian River County has a low-end chance for some excessive rainfall. Localized flooding is a possibility. You know, some low-lying areas, ponding on roadways, that kind of thing. It's the lowest of the scale, but just want to point out that ultimately we could pick up a few inches of rain in a couple of spots, how this plays out. So let's get into today. By the way, let me just double check that there's no additional advisories here. Nope, we just have our special marine warnings and nothing else of that. All right, so let's get into the models. I'm gonna bring up the HER model, the high resolution rapid refresh. Make sure I switch over to our model timeline so you guys can see that. We'll start at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and we can do 2 o'clock. I don't think that's gonna mess up the model, and loop this up. Today is obviously the 27th. Now, you kind of get an idea, right, of what we're talking about here. So this pattern keeps these storms pretty darn widespread for the remainder of the day. Hey, Jaden, how are you, man? Good to see you. Hope things are well. Aruba in the house. I love it. Getting slowly more cloudy as the day goes on. Still hot, need a shower. Look, it's always a battleground, right? My house has actually been basically dry all week. I could actually use a little bit of rain as well. I haven't turned back on the sprinklers. So I've got myself a little bit of crunchy grass. I'm actually debating, like I've been trying to hold out. I knew that the pattern was going to get a little bit more active. So it was like, all right, I don't want to throw these sprinklers on and waste that water. So trying to ultimately not allow that to happen, but we'll see how it plays out. Bit of a soup factory, no doubt. Okay, so here's how this is going to go on the HER model. First of all, through the remainder of the 1 o'clock hour, through the 2 o'clock hour, these storms are going to begin to line up right across I-95, mainly from northern sides of Volusia County, Daytona Beach, Holly Hill, Ponce Inlet, Wilbur by the Sea, Edgewater, Oak Hill, New Smyrna Beach, and then back into Brevard County. Again, Titusville, Sharps, the Cape, Merritt Island, Grant Valcaria. I could sit here and name 1,000 places, but you get the idea. If you know anyone who's either doing some boating or along the beaches, I mean, it is summertime, and we're taking a lot of family vacations, even us locals. We like to head to those area beaches. Make sure that they're very weather aware and that the storms ultimately are closing in earlier on this Friday afternoon. Within the next 45 minutes to an hour, we could have a fairly solid line of storms along I-95. Now, by 3 o'clock, what happens? Not much in the way of movement. This is where we could, again, see the storms pulse up, getting stronger, producing heavier rain, gustier winds, and a lot of lightning, which is why I'm concerned about the boaters and the beachgoers here in Volusia and Brevard counties, because these storms will be sitting until ultimately the East Coast sea breeze has enough energy to start to push the storms back inland. And that begins probably around the 4 o'clock hour. So beginning at 4 o'clock, these storms will begin to march inland a bit. Now, it doesn't mean that all of them get off of the I-95 corridor. We're just going to see the radar fill in here in interior sections closer to I-4. So Deltona and Sanford and Orlando and Kissimmee, maybe even over towards Lake County, we'll start to see a few. And then these will continue to just get more prominent in these areas. So you can see we could still have some heavier storms in Brevard County, but they're sneaking deeper into Osceola County or getting back into Polk County, getting into the Kissimmee area. Could see some pretty nasty storms today in the Orlando area. It's not going to be everyone, but you know, these storms could pulse up a bit, and there could be some heavier, strong to isolated severe storms over the Orlando metro area in that 5 to 6 o'clock time frame to be watching out for. Again, gusty winds is your primary threat. The other situation about this is when I go to 7 o'clock, remember we have a north wind here, right? So can the West Coast sea breeze get a little bit inland, and what ultimately is happening with that mid-level low? Remember, it's not just the sea breeze for today. There's a big enhancement with the sea breezes with that mid-level spin off of our East Coast, and ultimately you see the HER bottle just blows up these storms in a widespread fashion later today, right? Embedded within this, some strong, maybe isolated severe storms. It's not out of the question for the remainder of the late afternoon and early evening hours. By 9 o'clock, some of this activity has tried to kind of back build west into Ocala and Bellevue and the villages and, you know, the eastern sides of Citrus and Hernando and Pasco counties. Fairly covered up over Polk County, trying to get into the eastern sides of Hillsborough County as well. As we're losing the heat of the day here and we get to 10 o'clock, these storms might try and get towards the West Coast, but ultimately they would be dying out as they do so. So again, let's break down today one more time. You can see the storms penned along the East Coast the next couple of hours, then ultimately marching their way across right the spine of the state and then becoming very widespread. So that's what I expect the remainder today. If you have any evening plans, just make sure that you stay weather aware. Again, it is June here in Florida. We're used to some of this activity, but it's going to be a little bit more kicked up a notch here because of that, mid-level spin. Now, let's talk about Saturday. All right, and I've got a couple 3-day forecasts for you guys as well. So this is what it looks like if I just kind of loop this back and forth today, right? You can almost see the nice little kick of energy, some winds coming back out of the south there, but the East Coast sea breeze is a story. Now, starting tomorrow, we'll actually start to pick up a little bit more of a westerly component to things, and storms now will start to favor, again, the eastern side of our area, but traversing the state from west to east. So let's break down how tomorrow plays out. There could even be a cluster of storms along the Nature Coast early tomorrow morning. And I want to be clear about this. The storms over the weekend may not ultimately wait to develop until the afternoon. There's absolutely the possibility to at least get some scattered activity in the morning hours. So not a lot. Still expecting the best chance to be in the afternoon, but we could have a few showers or storms left over around daybreak that fall apart and then redevelop again in the afternoon hours. Here's what it looks like for tomorrow afternoon. Now look, again, not a horrible mid-afternoon. Still many dry hours and locations, but once these storms get going, they're going to get going in a hurry and will ultimately favor I-4 and east to I-95 for your Saturday. Now look, that doesn't mean that I'm not expecting there to be some decent storms in Tampa and St. Pete and the Bradenton, Sarasota areas, but the overall better chance should be a little bit farther south and east. I actually have a little bit more rain in the forecast for the Tampa Bay area from what I've seen looking at all the kind of the models, but just showing you the HRRR here favors the East Coast and I-4 a little bit more. So again, this is the afternoon hours through the early to mid-evening here on our Saturday. Clusters of stronger storms here. Winds will still be the primary threat. Some smaller sized hail. If they cluster up like that, you know, again, they could be good hail and rain producers. Ultimately, some flash flooding is not out of the question as well. And again, you see these storms ultimately pushing off the East Coast as we get into the morning hours, the overnight hours of Saturday. And once again, on Sunday morning, there could be a few showers or storms up towards northern Citrus and Levy counties, trying to push from the eastern side of the Gulf of Mexico, but ultimately dying out. Now, if I show you guys the much larger view of this entire loop all the way until Sunday morning, if you guys just note, there's just a little bit of a broader spin here, right? And you guys can kind of see that as well. Let's see here. Let me show you guys this. This will help tell the story as well. I use this product a lot for the tropical outlook on the Media Mundo channel, but I think it's apropos for what we're seeing right now. Yeah, Blue Goose, I do expect Brevard to be relatively wet because, again, you've got the Penn storms right now. Then the East Coast sea breeze kicking in, and then ultimately, you know, with the change in the pattern here of the West Coast sea breeze being able to march across the state, it should enhance the activity again along the East Coast, both Saturday and Sunday. This is a look at the absolute vorticity at the composite level of the low levels of the atmosphere. It's not completely surface-based, right? But it kind of gives you a composite view up to, I believe, 850 millibars. So the lower levels of the atmosphere. This is the little bit of a spin I'm talking about. There's also a little bit more back down here into the southeast Gulf of Mexico. There's more lift and instability over the peninsula over the weekend in general. It's really been gangbusters the last couple of days in the Bahamas and the southeast side of the state. That's kind of moving up to the north, but there's a little bit more here. The brighter colors is a little bit more in the way of spin in the atmosphere. That's what you're looking at on this map, is spin in the low levels of the atmosphere. And there's a bit out there to enhance the surface sea breezes. That's what I'm talking about. All right, so if I take this, switch it back over to the reflectivity, and then loop it up. This is the GFS model. So again, not as high resolution as what we have with the HRRR, but you get the kind of idea. So we've picked up the HRRR. Let's pick up the GFS Sunday morning. Right? Late in the day, but once again, widespread showers and storms. You know, here's 5 o'clock. Should be a little bit more of a typical pattern, afternoon to the evening hours. Again, can't rule out a couple of isolated showers or storms, kind of like western coastline that die out at daybreak or slightly after, and then the redevelopment in the late afternoon in the early evening hours. Ultimately, again, producing widespread storms. The coverage is going to be very high over the weekend. I've got kind of a broad 70% chance of coverage of storms for our area, minus the immediate West Coast, which will be slightly lower on our Saturday. This is the risk of severe storms for Saturday. Okay, Notice that there is no marginal risk at this point in time, but I've mentioned it several times during the live streams that we do, that typically speaking, especially with the summer pattern here in Florida, the Storm Prediction Center will upgrade the risk day of, and they'll wait till the day of. So like yesterday, this is what it looked like for today, but then this morning, they threw on this marginal risk. It's not out of the question that ultimately tomorrow we're going to have a marginal risk in some areas of Central Florida, and it's the same situation for Sunday. Again, the general thunderstorm risk right now with no actual area being shown from the Storm Prediction Center. I'm going to get back over to the live radar here for those who are just tuning in. And if you're just tuning in, thanks for taking a quick second. Hitting that like button for me. I do appreciate you guys doing so. If you have a specific question about the forecast, feel free to drop it in the comment section below as well. You know, again, while you're down there, liking, commenting, all of that helps to support the channel. Again, we have a few storms right now, right along our east coast that are trying to actually, in the short term, work their way off the coastline, but ultimately kind of developing and staying pinned along the coast and then marching their way back off towards the west. Now, let's get into the 3-day forecast I have, and then I do want to talk real quick about the tropics. So, for Orlando, widespread storms, widespread storms, widespread storms, okay? 70% chance each day, mainly favoring the time that we typically see them, mid-afternoon to the early evening. Can't rule out a couple holding on deeper into the overnight hours. Can't even rule out an isolated shower storm in the morning, but obviously as we crank up this energy, we're going to get the heat of the day to help fire off the storms in a more widespread fashion. Steamy tomorrow, 94 the daytime high, feels like temperatures easily knocking on the door of the 100-degree mark. It gets slightly cooler, and of course I'm using that term very loosely because when the winds turn a little bit more out of the west or slightly west-northwest with that pattern change, we'll probably see the temperature fall. It will also be part because there's just going to be a fair amount of clouds in the area as well. So look, it's not as if 92 is going to feel better or 90 is going to feel any better because it's going to be steamy. It is just going to be moisture trapped in from the rain that we've had. You know, 70s for morning lows out there as well. All right, in the Tampa area, 50% chance for storms tomorrow. So just not as much coverage, but again, still could be some intense storms late in the afternoon, early evening hours, 93 the daytime high, and then the storm coverage going up on Sunday and Monday up to a 70% chance. Daytime highs will remain in the lower 90s, morning lows will be in the mid 70s, and again, certainly expecting us to see triple digit feels like temperatures from time to time in Pinellas, Hillsborough, Manatee, Sarasota counties. Back out to a Conway cam. Again, this is the most active camera at the hour. We're looking back off to the east. You're seeing those building showers and storms right now. I mean, you just see the lower, darker bases to those clouds along the horizon. And again, this camera is able to look back into the southern sides of Volusia and the northern sides of Brevard County, right where those storms are developing at the hour. So that's what we're seeing in the Orlando metro area at this point in time. Look, we're not going to see a lot in the way of any rain in the short term. A couple of light showers could develop. Again, a little bit of a cluster here in Lake County, but it's going to take a while. Anything that kind of gets going in Orange County, Seminole County, including the Sanford area, in the short term, shouldn't really pulse up and be strong, okay? It'll be more light passing showers with the southwest mid-level winds, but once the winds at the surface get strong enough east and push those storms back out to the west, those are the storms that are going to be much more prolific later in the day. Let's talk tropics real quick. I'm going to go out to our wide tropical view here. If you don't know, this is a very interesting disturbance right now in the northwest side of the Caribbean, okay? The Cayman Islands, the Yucatan, Honduras, Belize, and of course I talk a lot about this on the Media Mundo channel, but the Hurricane Center has put a low-end 20% chance of development as this broad system goes over the Yucatan and into the Southwest Gulf as we get into the latter part of the weekend and early next week. Just highlighting that, you know, again, if you don't know, I think we talked about it on the channel, right? We had Andrea. I mean, it was extremely short-lived. Maybe we didn't even talk about it on the CFLW channel here because I forget if it developed Monday or Tuesday. I feel like it developed Tuesday, so we hadn't had a chance to talk about it. I don't know why they waited to pull the trigger on Tropical Storm Andrea because it lasted all of about 12 hours. They were going to do it. They should have done it Sunday of last week and then had it hold on until Tuesday night. But they decided to make it a Tropical Storm Tuesday morning. And by Tuesday night, it was gone. It was moving into cooler waters anyway. So we have had the A-name storm, if you weren't aware. So this would be Barry if it were to develop, but it's a really low-end chance. But what I ultimately want to talk about here, this is actually segueing into more of, you know, what could be happening in our area down the road. So I'm going to take the GFS model out, and I'm going to take it all the way out until July 4th. What's going to happen here as we get towards next weekend, and of course it's a big holiday weekend, I'm very aware of that, is that we're going to get a little bit more of a troughing pattern coming off of our East Coast and off of the northern side of the Gulf of Mexico in general, okay? And you can just clearly see that after a little bit of a break in the action mid next week, as we get to the 4th, you're just going to see a lot more activity here, a lot more action, right? And along this trough area, certainly the opportunity this time of the year that there could be a little bit of a spin up, all right? So this is kind of the next spot for us, beginning around July 1st, July 2nd, July 3rd, and you can see that little bit of a twist. Now, nothing is standing out at this point in time. This would be an elongated area, right, at the mid-levels with this trough, and you can get little spins along this, but this is the next opportunity for us, right, towards the end of next week, of course, right around July 4th. Not much to look at with winds associated with this. I'll loop that up for you guys as well, just so you can get an idea. Again, just down here real quick, just a heck of a lot of wind, if anything else, going into the Southwest Gulf. Whether it ultimately spins up or not, you know, is a big question mark. But beginning, you know, right around July 1st, you can start to see some of these purples pushing off of the coastline. That's that troughing pattern beginning to develop that does go across our peninsula and into the northern side of the Gulf. Now, what would typically happen is you would get potentially something developing right off of our East Coast and then moving up the Gulf Stream, right? That's not the worst case scenario for us because obviously it goes away, but just to show you, like right here, right? Take a look at the GFS model. Let me back it up just a second here. Where'd it go? There it is. So this is the second, right? Kind of out of the Southeast Gulf, little interesting area. There it is, small little donut hole, not a ton of wind. You know, those, those winds are gonna be probably even slightly weaker than a tropical depression and then moving away. But ultimately, I would expect next weekend to be a little bit more active, regardless, probably better rain and storm chances for our area. I know it's not a great timing with a holiday weekend. I'm not ready to deep dive into that as of yet, but that's a situation that I'll be watching for us here very, very closely. All right, back home. And again, anyone have any specific questions of the forecast, let me know. I think we've covered it pretty well here. Do have a special weather statement now for Indian River County. And again, this is ultimately what's going to be happening, guys. We're going to start to see these storms get a little bit stronger right now in coastal Indian River County, 50-mile-an-hour winds and some quarter-size hail. And it goes for 40 minutes. It's also going to give you an idea. When you see these special weather statements go for, 45 minutes, an hour, you know that they expect these storms to not move very quickly and ultimately get stronger and stronger. And they are beginning to pulse up a little bit. Mico, Grant Valcaria, Malabar, Palm Bay. Storms are still fairly prolific over the Cocoa area, Port St. John, Cape. Again, movement is still northeast, but ultimately these storms will start to slow down towards Oak Hill, Port Orange, Daytona Beach, Ormond. A couple of scattered showers have worked their way up into Flagler County at the hour as well. Very light in nature. Interior sections of Volusia County, Astor towards Pearson and northern Lake County as well. And again, this is, the ultimate pattern. Blue Goose, you might get some even before that, my friend. But look, if you live in the central or the eastern part of the state, you could ultimately have 3 days of pretty stormy weather from time to time in the afternoon and the evening. West Coast will be a little bit drier here in the short term, but they will pick up better storm chances Sunday and Monday as well. Okay, obviously, it's an active pattern. I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on it. If these storms start to get a little bit more organized, we get some higher end special weather statements or some clusters of severe storms, I'll be back on the channel. I'll be monitoring the situation over the weekend as well. Once again, you guys should be doing so as well. And again, if there's any impactful weather here in Central Florida being produced out of the storms that we talked about for the weekend, I will be back on. There's a fairly high chance that happens. We'll just see how it plays out. If for some reason things generally cooperate and we just get generalized thunderstorms, which we expect this time of the year, I'll see you guys Monday at 1 o'clock for the next edition of CFLW, the show. Please remember that CFLW is sponsored by the Lean Law Firm of Central Florida. You see their logo at the bottom of your screen. They're a great supporter of the channel. And we never like to think about it, but we do live in Florida. We get storm damage and it's storm season. You get storm damage to your house, hail damage, wind damage, tropical storm, hurricane damage. They can walk you through every step of the insurance claim process. They do offer free consultation and policy reviews. So if you'd like to check them out, just to kind of get an idea of what Bobby Lean and the team are like there at the Lean Law Firm, go to leanonmelaw.com for more information. Friends, if you're here, thanks for taking a quick second and liking this live stream. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Remember, this is a live only channel. I do these Monday and Friday shows so that you guys can stay up to date with what I'm thinking. And ultimately, when there's impactful weather, I'm back on live, regardless of the time of the day, to track those storms for you guys live for us here. These become recorded videos under the live tab of the CFLW, the channel, so you can watch them at your leisure. But I really do appreciate all my friends like Chessie and Blue Goose and Kevin and Jaden jumping in the chat and interacting with me here during the live version of this. Love that interaction. That's ultimately why I do this, so we can keep in touch. Friends, have a great rest of your Friday. If I don't see you, but again, I'll be watching these storms. If I need to jump on, have those notifications on, and you'll know the reason why. Until I next see you guys, take care. And again, I'll probably see you pretty soon.